Someone asked me what was most valuable about your studies in India with Swami Dayananda. And I would say that I learned how to learn, and I learned how to understand my own mind and to be honest about my mind and the type of thoughts that I entertain, and to be sincere about who I am as a person and about the quality of thoughts. And I feel that I've learned that the quality of thoughts determines my life, determines who I am. And so I guess attitude underneath the quality of thoughts, there's an abiding attitude. And just observing all this about myself, about oneself, I think has so much value in terms of inner peace and happiness centered on oneself. So we find happiness in the world based on how we feel about ourselves. And so I think that I did learn that. And I'm so very grateful for that. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How do you think your time in India helped shift your perspective, taking a step away from culture here and people, and how do you think it sets you apart from maybe the other yoga instructors around here or anyone else in the practice?
Well, that's, fundamentally my mind changed. I was trained in the Upanishad, studying the Upanishad in Sanskrit for 12 years. So that's a profound teaching on the nature of reality and the nature of the self and the nature of God as one non-dual reality. And that is a profound teaching, and a profound teaching about the self being different than we take ourselves to be. So it took me many years to even dial my mind into what are we really talking about here. But over many years, I kept pursuing this topic, and gradually I wasn't just listening to profound teachings about the self, the nature of the self, or the essence of the self, or one's identity. I became that. So I identify myself. I as my identity is the profound. The profound of the profound is the identity. So that that does change things, and then I had to. Went into this ancient Indian culture, had to become that type of person who's wearing white and following a certain ashram, codes of behavior, eating a simple diet, and anyway, showing up to class around the clock, class after class after class after class, and then study. So I had to follow these rules and protocols. So I had to become that person, very different than a San Francisco chick that I showed up as in my 40s. So I had to become that person to get access to those teachings, and then the teachings are taking root, have taken or continue to take root in my mind. So I'm just fundamentally different person from those teachings, but I'm so grateful for that. So
be the most effective practice, or how have you watched your studies transform your clients?
Yeah, well, the way I can be present with others is based on the way I've learned to be present to myself, to my own way of thinking, to my own personality, to my body and the body issues. So the more I'm comfortable with myself and accept myself, the more I can be comfortable with others in their process and allow them to be as they are without me having the pressure to need another person to change for my sake. And that might sound obvious, but it's actually, for me was a big transformation, just to realize that everyone takes up their own space, and everyone has a right to take up their own space, and that is just what it means to be a human being, just to live and let live. But that sounds nice, but in practice it takes inner transformation to let myself be, accept myself, accept my limitations, and grant others to have their limitations, and to let them just, be who they are, as they are, when they are. And that's a growing process of growth, to be available to myself and to others in that way.
What do you think would be the best outcome from your work with people?
For others?
Or for you too.
Oh,
like,
what's
intense. I know, these are big questions.
I know.
Like, your motivation behind the work, and if you were to, leave a legacy behind of the work that you've done with people.
Well, I came back to teach the Upanishads in full, from the original Sanskrit. Swamiji said, go home and teach all the Upanishads. So I came back thinking, I was a spiritual teacher, trained, qualified to teach, and it didn't stick. So I realized, having gone through such a transformation, I had to change my personality to become part of the American culture, and that has taken multiple years to even begin to dial into what it means to think from this cultural perspective, as it did. I was in India for over 13 years, on and off, but for much of that time. So I had to become part of that culture. I was no longer a newbie. I knew how to be in that culture in a respectful way. I had a full education to participate in the ancient culture of India and the temple culture. But now that's a different person than the American person, who speaks a certain way with a certain accent, uses certain language, vernacular expressions, clothing, and then all the thinking processes. So that takes years to change into that new person. But so, I think just self-acceptance, self-acceptance, accepting others and accepting myself, and just letting life, unfold, and to enjoy the process.
Right. Is there anything in particular that you want to talk about, that you might want people to know about you or your practice?
I think the Sanskrit came out in the Upanishad in the 12 years or whatever. Okay, one more thing. So Swami Dayananda is a special person in the history of humanity, as far as I know. I mean, he did take this ancient teaching that was available to male Brahmins in India, and he was a renegade. He took that full training, which is a 12-year teaching of the Upanishads in the original Sanskrit, with Sanskrit grammar study, which takes years and years. But he condensed it into a 3-year course and made it available to women in India for the first time, and Westerners. And so he taught 3-year courses, which I was part of, from 2010 to 2013. And but I had studied 9 years with him prior to that, so I had done a lot of psychological work on myself from Swamiji's guidance and the guidance of his teachers, who had done masters or PhDs in psychology. So everyone was, helping me to understand the mind, the nature of the mind, and my mind, and how my mind works. But so Swamiji was a master in psychology, but also in spirituality, the ancient lineage that it goes as far back as the ancients go, through the Upanishadic literature and tradition. So now Swamiji was a rare guru in the sense of one who brings the mind from darkness to lightness, or gives the traditional teachings on enlightenment. Guru can mean a teacher of music or yoga, but guru in this case has a specific meaning of changing the nature, the identity from the individual body, mind, sense complex full of self-judgment and sense of inadequacy to the infinite reality that is has expanded sense of everything. The nature of everything is the nature of everything is the nature of the self, which is the infinite self, and so everything is in me. So I'm not limited to the identity of my body and mind. Therefore, I can accept myself, because that is not the whole of who I am. That's the limited part, and I can grow through my own mind. It's like a laboratory. I can use my mind and my body to continue to grow into this great knowledge. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. To what we've been doing for the past 2 days, prenatal yoga.
Oh, right. How does it bring you to yoga?
How does it relate to yoga? And then specifically prenatal, why are you attracted to that, and what made you want to pursue that specialty?
Yeah, so I'll transition from the Indian teaching of Upanishad on the nature of reality, which, you can call a spiritual teaching, but people can say spiritual is a lot of things. It's a very specific definition of that word. And so transition from that to yoga, to prenatal yoga, because that's 3 separate things. That teaching really pulled me in a way that I had no choice over it. I recognized what it was for some reason, and Swamiji presented it in a way that I could not say that I didn't see the value in it. And it had such a high value because I saw it for what it was when I was in India, and when I initially met Swamiji. I could not do anything else with my life because I saw the value. It was no longer an unknown. And so anyway, I did give up everything in my entire life, everything I had been doing. I just put my things in storage and said, I'll follow this, and I'll follow it until I find out what's really here for myself, which really did happen. And then I came in through yoga. Through my yoga teacher, I met Swami Dayananda. My yoga teacher said, don't study with anybody in spirituality except Swami Dayananda. Because I asked him, what do I do in spirituality now that I'm committed to yoga? In the 1990, maybe, in 1990. So I did that. I read Swamiji's book that was difficult to understand at that time, this big, huge set of books on Bhagavad Gita. I couldn't really make sense of it. But then when I actually met Swamiji, I was just taken by that, by him and the teaching and how it was presented in such a loving, compassionate, sensitive way, for free, very supportive lineage. I had to let go of my identity as a yoga teacher. For me, that was a very superficial identity. I was fixated on my body, on having this perfect body. I was young, and San Francisco and hopping around, wearing whatever outfits. And it was like that identity had no relevance. In fact, I would go to India, I'd arrive in the ashram, and people would say, hi, and I'd say hi, and I'd just tell them my life. And the person would look at me like, so what? And I would go, whoops. And I would just like zip up that identity and put it on a shelf or whatever, just like gone. And then just show up as somebody who's available to learn what's happening here, which is to change the identity. So that became very familiar, but it took me a while to change the yoga identity. I am a body conscious person. So that I actually, did yoga in my room in private. Nobody knew anything about that. But the yoga became internalized as a posture for sitting and listening to Swamiji. So, I have a injury that brought me into yoga. I had to take it seriously. So I used posture and breath in a very subtle way. And so I did all this yoga through sitting for 12 years, sitting without moving practically. So when I first came to India, I was this San Francisco chick, and I was sitting in a room full of Indians and other, international people Swamiji was teaching. And some Indians came up to me afterwards and said, "You're from San Francisco, you're from USA, you're a yoga teacher?" And one said, "If you're a yoga teacher, why were you fidgeting in your seat?" And I said, "Well, I learned to change my position to balance the pelvis and the breath. So I changed my position so I'm symmetrical, but my body is symmetrical." And he said, "Oh, well, asana siddhi in my understanding is sitting without moving for 48 minutes, meaning the accomplishment of yoga is to sit without moving." And I said, "Well, I didn't know that." Well, it sounded insane to me because I need to move in order to make my body comfortable and to keep my posture alignment. And so I was really fixated on my body. Well, anyway, the result of 12 years of study is that I started to not move for 48 minutes just without even effort. It wasn't happening. It just happened because I was so intent on listening to and understanding the subtle nuances of these Upanishadic sentences that I became still in my body so that my mind could have this laser focus to understand the subtle nuances of these teachings. So anyway, that's the Indian part of losing my yoga identity. Okay, then coming back to the USA, people said, I thought I was going to be a spiritual teacher. People said, "Why don't you teach yoga?" And I said, "I'm not a yoga teacher. I think I was a yoga teacher, but that's not who I am anymore." And they said, well, anyway, so over a couple of years, I had to figure out what to do. So somebody had invited me to teach at a yoga retreat, so I reluctantly did. And anyway, I grew over years back into that identity. Identity takes years. So that's what I've learned is people's identity is the most important thing. How you relate to an identity, like how you support a person's identity is the most important thing in relationship. People want to feel good about themselves. So in terms of pregnancy, I just think that it's a blessing to come into that by happenstance. Elise, my niece, is a videographer and became pregnant, and so I wanted to work with Elise through her pregnancy, teaching online yoga, and then have have the blessing of her support as a videographer. So I just consider it a great blessing to be able to work with mothers in their pregnancy, and I've had other women seek me out as their yoga teacher through their pregnancy for difficult conditions, spinal conditions, because I teach yoga for special conditions. So people with special conditions who've gotten pregnant have sought me out to be their online yoga teacher. And I just consider it the greatest blessing to be supporting someone who's building a baby, be in the process of building a baby and bringing a baby into the world. So it's just here for me, it's just a God blessing. that I'm honored to be part of and just love and adore. And I just say one more thing. The most amazing thing about yoga for pregnancy is watching the change in the woman, the mother to be. Her body changes so dramatically and in such a beautiful, beneficial way. From every 10-minute period, I see like lifetime change happening in the body. Healthier body, toning up areas that need to be toned. We bring our preconditions into pregnancy and solve those during that pregnancy if you have that kind of support through yoga. But even more than the mother, watching the baby grow and the changes in the baby and how yoga causes the baby to expand, even in any 10-minute period, if the pose is really beneficial for the mother and the baby, supported, open, the baby grows. It just expands, softens, and grows. And it's just amazing to be a witness to that. It's just such an honor and a blessing. The goal when I came here was like, I went to my therapist and I couldn't even speak English language. I couldn't hardly understand people's, expressions. And I went to my therapist and I was in shock to see the difference, who I had become compared to her. I just said, I really want to become normal, So anyway, I think I've kind of gotten there after 6 years and now I can sort of bring the whole thing in, bring back what I had to let go of to be in this culture. Anyway.
Cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, I love hearing just all of the different progressions of you and your identity, and I think it'll make people realize things about themselves too, just hearing your story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, identity is a big thing. Identity is the complexes that a person has from their childhood and culture. And the Vedanta worked out those complexes, as terms of my identity. Now, they can come up, but how deeply rooted they are, that's a different thing because of having expanded the identity to not take myself, my personality, my complexes so seriously as the core of who I am and that what identifies me and gives meaning in my life. There's something expanded that makes that more malleable and more manageable and more fun to play with and fun to see others' psyche and complexes and help loosen those roots. That is the thing that interests me the most, and not just in terms of deep work with people, but just in terms of everyday conversation, how to just relax with identity play, and particularly I learned not to trigger people's complexes in terms of language, not just body language, but actual topics that we talk about, how to support a person feeling good about themselves and not to trigger self-identity that's, triggering, like, a person's body shape, a person's, uncomfortable areas of discomfort. Let a person bring out what they want to in the way they want to. Anyway.